Working with our member organisation Wine Australia, Primary Industries Education Foundation Australia, in collaboration with Geography Teachers Association of Victoria, has developed the Discovering Australian Wine Regions student workbook designed for Year 9 and 10 students, which aims to promote learning about viticulture and Australia's wine industry in an age-appropriate and respectful manner. The resource has a focus on the biome of Australian wine-growing regions and highlights the interconnections between people and places within these regions, as well as global interconnectedness through Australia's export of wine. The resource highlights the sustainability considerations of the wine industry and allows students to consider the impacts of a changing climate on the future of the industry. This resource is aligned to version 9 of the Australian curriculum. To access the Discovering Australian Wine Regions resource, visit the PrimeZone website and use the search bar to search the terms wine, grapes, wines, wine regions, viticulture, or vineyards. There you will find an overview of the resource and a link to click to download the student workbook. The workbook consists of 6 lessons exploring different aspects of the geography curriculum, incorporating geography knowledge and understanding as well as geography skills. An overview of each of curriculum outcomes for each lesson can be found on the first page of the student workbook. Lesson 1 of the sequence explores the history, varieties, and regions of Australian wine. Throughout this lesson, students will be provided with an understanding of the different varieties of grapes grown for wine production in Australia, as they explore the features of the temperate biome where grapes are grown. Students will analyse and interpret climatic graphs and conduct a case study exploring the features of the Barossa wine region, including the climate, history, varieties of grapes produced, and the interconnections between this growing region and others around the world. Students will use provided links to conduct a guided research to develop an understanding of the role of soil types and elevation in viticulture. The worksheets within the student workbook contain editable text boxes, allowing them to be completed on student devices or as a printed resource that can be completed by hand. Lesson 2 delves into the Australian wine industry and export markets, with a particular focus on the ways that places and people are interconnected with other places through trade in goods and services. Students will compare and evaluate geographical data to draw conclusions about changes in Australian wine production over time, explaining patterns and trends observed. Using geographical knowledge, students will create graphs showing sets of data for Australian wine exports to China, the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, and New Zealand. Lesson 3 of the student workbook explores the way that wine grapes are grown and the conditions that impact grape production, including climate, soil health, and water availability. During this lesson, students will develop an understanding of the ideal growing conditions for wine production and will consider how the threat of a changing climate is challenging producers in the industry. Students will utilise geographical tools, including Australia's Climate Atlas, to observe long-term climate trends and make predictions about the ways future climate trends may impact Australia's wine industry. Throughout Lesson 4, students will develop an understanding of the sustainability considerations made by viticulturists during grape production and the ways challenges posed by a changing climate are being addressed through management practices in Australia's wine regions. Students will have the opportunity to investigate real-world examples of climate adaptation strategies used in wine production and consider the role of technology in addressing threats such as extreme weather events and increased risk of pests and disease as a result of climate change. Lesson 5 explores the interconnections between Australia's wine sector and the wider community within growing regions. Students will identify the advantages of diversification for producers and consider the ways that tourism and local businesses in these regions benefit from the industry. The tasks in this lesson highlight the ways tourism promoted through the wine industry through events and attractions improves the economic outcomes of communities as a whole. The final lesson in the sequence challenges students to apply their understanding to conduct a research task into specific wine regions of Australia. This lesson requires students to conduct research and collate information to present reports on 2 wine regions within Australia. Students use mapping tools to describe the features of their chosen region and conduct in-depth studies into 2 selected wineries. Students had the opportunity to predict changes in the characteristics of their selected regions over time and analyse and evaluate possible sustainability measures that could be implemented to ensure the longevity of viticulture in those areas.